Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me for a uh, primer on approaches to align with your organization's mission. This is Fundraising 101. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, I was reading something in the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Diane O'Day. I work as a fiscal sponsorship program manager at Southeast Uplift, which is the District 3 coalition. Our mission is to collaborate with Portland's District 3 community to build informed, inclusive, and participatory neighborhoods that support our social and ecological well-being. A few things about what I do in my position as a fiscal sponsorship program manager. I support about 25 nonprofits as they venture into fundraising and all things related to building up a nonprofit. So a lot of what I'll be talking to you today is informed by that. In the chat, go ahead and please share your name and what organization you belong to and what you hope to get out of this session. Great. Thank you. Welcome, Simca. Welcome, John. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Peggy. Welcome, Brian, Priscilla, Kathy. Great. So it looks like some of you are looking to learn just a little bit more about fundraising in general, or maybe figuring out a plan for fundraising. So I'm excited to talk to you about that today. I am going to now pull you and kind of ask just to kind of read who's in the room, what kind of fundraising strategies you're already doing. If none, feel free to submit with nothing, but go ahead and check all that apply about which fundraising you currently do. And if there's another one that I'm missing, go ahead and type it in the chat because I think it's important to have a mutually beneficial mutual share out with each other. So if you have something you want to help others learn about that you're already doing, feel free. Throughout this session, I'm going to be asking you all to share your own experiences because I think we learn best from each other. Okay, so I'm seeing that a lot of folks are used to seeking donations from individuals and also applying for grants. So that's great. And then there's some others that are, um, there's 3 of you that have other tactics. So if you want to share those in the chat, feel free. Oh, I need to click share results. So there, you can see the results, how that plays out. So let's get into it. All right. So let's see. Today we are going to, this is our agenda for today. First things first, we're just going to define what is meant by fundraising in the context of this session. Then we'll get into a discussion of types of funders and what motivates them to, which will help inform your fundraising strategies. We'll then get into common fundraising activities and what's needed to fundraise effectively. And then we'll get into fundraising tips and tricks. So there's a lot of different ways that an organization can raise revenue or raise funds. So fundraising is broadly defined as the raising of assets and resources from various sources for the support of an organization or a specific project. So in today's session, we are going to be focusing mostly on donor related fundraising. So we're not going to talk about things such as fee for service or other activities you can get paid for. Instead, we're going to talk about soliciting donations or going for grants. So let's get into it. In this session, we will discuss 4 primary types of funders and what motivates them. So we're going to start by talking about individuals. So that's just a community member or someone else you know. And then the next type of funder are businesses. So that can be local businesses here in Portland. It can also be national or international corporations. The third type of funder we're going to discuss is government. So that can be local, state, federal, regional. There's lots of different types of government entities out there. And then finally, we're going to talk about grant makers, which some of these businesses and government can also be grant makers. So we're going to unpack that a little. So first things, we're going to talk about individual donors. So you'll notice on the left, we're going to talk about what types of donations they give. And then on the right, we're going to discuss why they give. So what motivates them to give. So when it comes to individual donors, so that can be a community member, a family member, it could be someone you met at a networking event, it's just one person. They will likely give a one-time donation. So that donation can be anywhere between $20 to a couple of thousand. It can range in size, how much that one-time donation is. There are also donors who are likely to give you recurring donations. So for instance, here at Southeast Uplift, with the organizations we support, we do have a smattering of folks who have committed to sending monthly donations for a specific cause that they believe in, and an organization that they want to support. Individual donors can also give matching gifts. So some people work for organizations that offer a matching donation, or another donor can say, well, we're matching it. So then they'll give because of that. There's also bigger types of gifts that donors can give. So that would be a major gift or a donor advised fund. So some folks have their own pot of money that they then give out via something called a donor advised fund. So that tends to be larger amounts. It can be smaller, but it's generally, in my experience, it's 1,000 or more. And then also individuals can leave legacy gifts. So that would be if someone is committing to bequeathing their estate to you or part of their estate. So they may include your organization in their estate planning. So when it comes to individual donations, these are generally what is called unrestricted funds. So unrestricted funds mean that you can use them for anything related to your organization's mission or operations, unless it's specified. But in general, individual donors, funds from individual donors are unrestricted, meaning that they can be spent however your organization believes they're best spent. So, why do individual donors give? Well, a lot of folks give because they want to make an impact. So, they may feel hopeless or helpless when it comes to a social problem. So, they want to give to feel like they are contributing to helping mitigate that social problem. So, for example, during the SNAP benefit shutdown late last year, there were a lot of folks, a lot of individual donors who were giving smaller amounts, but there was a large amount of people who were giving smaller amounts to help feed folks. People also give if they feel a connection to an organization's mission. So if they care about the environment, or they care about ending homelessness, or if they care about food insecurity, they're going to donate. This one, it reinforces how they see themselves. So some people just simply give because of their own self-esteem. It feels good to do good. Sometimes that is what motivates people. They also may just have a great deal of trust or familiarity with your organization. So they may be a friend or a colleague. They also may be moved by a compelling story or a call to action. So they may read on social media something about your organization, someone served by the organization, and then they may want to give because of that. This one is less likely, but some donors, this would be more likely for major donors, but some folks do donate because they appreciate their recognition. They also appreciate being involved, or like perhaps as an invited guest at a networking event, or recognized on social media, or an annual report. So that is a motivator why they give. Tax benefits, it's usually secondary why individual donors give, but that is a big one when it comes to donor advised funds in particular, because that does come with a significant tax write-off. And another reason why folks give is because you ask them and you made it easy to give. So if you have like a text code or a quick QR code where someone can give quickly and easily via like an online platform, or Venmo giving, or PayPal giving, they're going to be more likely to give. And research has shown that personal connection, that personal ask, is what makes people feel motivated to give, because it adds a little bit of social pressure to them. So examples of how to gain individual donations, a few examples that I've seen. So we have some folks will do social media marketing, specifically geared towards soliciting donations for a specific cause or initiative. For instance, with the SNAP shutdown, folks said, we will get money out. We will get food out to folks. We'll get gift cards for groceries out to folks quickly if you donate here. Other ways people get individual donations. So Simca wrote in the chat about perhaps creating a fundraiser event. So that is a great way to get donations. There are also other methods, such as direct mail campaigns, attending networking events, having certain like perks involved with individual donations. So for instance, one of our organizations has different levels where if you give like $50, you get a tote bag. So, like the old public radio kind of method. Can you all in the chat name some other examples that you may be considering to solicit individual donation? Hey, Peggy says holding networking events and asking. Chris says we believe we will get more donations for specific capital campaigns. Yes, Chris, that's a great point. So if you're specific, especially if your organization is a neighborhood association, which Chris belongs to, if you have a specific goal, like you want to put up banners, or you want to put up those little placards over your street signs, or if you want to do a street plaza, having those specific asks for folks and doing a campaign, putting flyers up, sending out postcards to folks, so a direct mail campaign, having a social media marketing campaign for something very specific in your neighborhood, those folks will be more likely to donate because it relates to their quality of life and livability of the community. Okay, so Simca says, I know some individuals or orgs where a certain level of donation gives you access to some kind of content. For instance, a weekly Zoom call, or say in a behind the scenes giving behind the scenes input. So yeah, so that's a great, that's a fun kind of low cost way of engaging your donors. And then Brittany says, soliciting donations for a street plaza and offering community networking events. Yeah, those are all great ideas. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so basically, what I'm already hearing from you all is you all seem to understand that it's really important to continue to cultivate the relationship with your individual donors and maintain those connections, which I'm glad to see. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about businesses. So like I said earlier, businesses that can be local to Portland, or it can be an international organization. So some things that they can give small to large donations. So sometimes they'll send you a couple $100, or they may they may include you in a giving campaign. Businesses can also give grants. So there are some larger, that's more likely with larger corporations, but they do have a lot of larger corporations have a grant making area of their business. They can also offer sponsorships. So I know that the NBA offers sponsorships. So the Trailblazers here in Portland, they'll offer sponsorships. Well, they'll give an organization a couple of $1,000s. Businesses are also great for in-kind donations. So in this in this definition, in-kind donations refers to goods or services. So goods or services that could be goods for a silent auction that can then be used to solicit individual donations. It could be catering for an event. That way it lowers your cost. It can also be, I've seen some organizations solicit donations for key equipment that they need to continue their organization's mission. So businesses can help in a lot of different ways. They can also offer program support, meaning that they can give you funds that are restricted to a specific initiative or cause, or they can give general operating support. That one's less likely. What's more likely is that they'll give you money to support an event that you're having, or some kind of initiative. And also businesses will offer workplace giving or employee match campaigns, where they will essentially, like in some cases, double your donation, or say they give you a certain pot of money and then you get to choose where that comes from. We often see donations at Southeast Uplift come through a platform called Benevity that way. And so if you do have an organization and you're thinking about if you do work for a business, and or are thinking of soliciting donations from businesses, ask your individual donors if their employee to check to see if their employee matches gifts. So businesses, they're more business oriented in why they give. They're less about feelings and they're more about the optics of giving. So a primary reason why they give is because it publicly advances their reputation. So in essence, it makes them look good to say that they gave $1 million to combat childhood homelessness. They will also give if the arrangement is a mutually beneficial one, meaning they get advertisement. Advertisement is a big one. They like to be recognized. Another reason why businesses give is if there is mission alignment. So, for example, there are right now there's On Point Credit Union. It has a grant making process that focuses on giving grants to organizations that help with financial literacy. So then that helps On Point's mission by doing that. And ultimately, a huge reason why businesses give is because of the tax benefits. So generally, businesses and corporations have a certain budget of funds that they have to get out or that they would like to get out because it does come with a certain tax benefit. So when it comes to soliciting donations from businesses, it's important to make it as easy as possible for them to give you money. So this one generally entails holding meetings with key staff or simply walking into a business such as a grocery store and soliciting donations. So what's important when you are soliciting donations from businesses is you should always have a letter ready to give them. You have to leave something with them and make sure that your organization's EIN, which is the tax number, is on the letter that you leave. Or if you send out letters, make sure that they have your tax ID number, because in my experience as someone who has solicited in-kind donations for raffles and as prizes, sometimes I would send emails out or letters out and I would include the tax ID number for the organization. And I wouldn't hear from anybody, but then suddenly in the mail, I would receive something for our raffle. So sometimes people just plug in your tax ID and then just send it off because they know they're getting a tax benefit. Other things to include when you are speaking with businesses, you have to make the case why it helps them. So, for example, if they're going to be providing a donation or sponsorship to an event, tell them how many people are coming to that event, because in their minds, they're thinking, how much exposure are they getting from that event? So say you have an event, you're expecting 1,000 people, you say your message, your logo will reach 1,000 people. You can also tell them that you will thank them on social media, thank them on your website, on materials, etc. But businesses, they really love the public acknowledgement. Okay, so now we're going to get into government. So on the whole, government can give contracts to complete some services that function kind of as a grant. They are often grant making entities as well, or they can offer sponsorships. So government funding is it's interesting because government can provide a lot of different types of funding. It's not just grants. You can meet with certain staff in an office, describe your mission, and they may decide that they want to just go ahead and draw up a contract for services with you. They also might want to sponsor an event if their mission aligns with your mission. So government is interesting because they give to advance public policy goals. So, for example, a huge donor here in Portland, a huge government donor, is with the city of Portland, and that's called the Portland Clean Energy Fund. So their mission is to have to advance climate resilience and clean energy here in Portland. It was adopted via a levy, I believe, and so they give out money to advance that public policy goal of making Portland more climate resilient. Another reason why government gives is to deliver public services that they cannot do directly. So nonprofits are often seen as more nimble and flexible when it comes to completing certain tasks or doing certain things. So, for example, you'll see at Multnomah County, you see preschool for all. You also see a lot of nonprofits are contracted to do homeless services. And let's see, there's something in the chat. Let me just check real quick. Oh. And then another reason why government may give money out, and this one's huge for contract for services. Sometimes government is not the best entity to reach communities, especially underrepresented communities or marginalized communities that have a high amount of distrust. So government will engage in a contract process with an organization that has the trust and rapport and legitimacy with underrepresented communities in order to carry out certain tasks, such as related to public health. Public health is a big one. Government also will give if you have a proven track record. So one thing to remember is government funding is often the most burdensome funding source because it comes with a high amount of record keeping and compliance requirements. So when you think about outreaching to government or engaging with government funding, it's important to understand if you have the infrastructure to do that. So some ways to outreach to government would be to check out what types of offices or bureaus align with your organization's mission, find key staff from those offices and start to request meetings with them where you describe what you're doing and how what you're doing can help them fulfill their mission. Oh, this is a great tip. So Chris has a great tip that I will also read in our fundraising tips and tricks. But Chris says, before you accept a government draft or grant, create a draft template for the final report that you'll need to provide placeholders that you'll need to provide with placeholders for the actual data. That will remind you what data you need to capture as you implement your project. So you're not having to guess at the quantitative results when you write up the final report. And so what Chris is basically saying, so it says here, you have to have a proven track record. You do have to measure impact throughout your activities. And so measuring and documenting your impact, so what's known as program evaluation, is critical, especially with government funding and also with grant makers. So grant makers, that can be foundations, that can be government, that can be other nonprofits. For example, here at Southeast Uplift, we give a small grant we do community small grants every year. So grant makers, they can give small, like mini grants that are a couple hundred to very large grants. These grants can be a one-time grant, or it can be to fund something for multiple years. grants can come as general operating support, which means basically capacity building support, or it can be restricted to a specific program or activity. So, say you apply for a grant and you say, I am applying for money to do this very specific initiative. Or the general operating support is usually called a capacity building grant. So, why do they give? So, it has to advance both their mission and your mission and their impact. So, grant makers, you may have noticed that different grant makers have different missions, different goals that they are trying to achieve. And so, um, one thing to always remember when you're looking for grants is to ensure that there is alignment with what they are hoping to achieve and what you can commit to doing. I have seen some organizations in the past really spend a lot of time going for a grant that just simply will not align, it'll be a mission misalignment. And so it's really important to always be clear on an organization's mission and what types of projects they are willing to fund. So, grant makers also like to create a measurable social impact. So that's where the evaluation comes in. So, grant makers, they want to produce tangible change. So, they are often looking for clear outcomes, evidence-based research and approaches, and demonstrated effectiveness. So they want you to make the case why what you are proposing is backed by research or by past observations. They also give because they want to fill the gaps where government or markets fall short. And then they also want to drive systems change. So many grant makers focus on long-term structural changes by addressing root causes. So they're not just trying to look at the symptom, they're trying to address root causes of our social problems. And so, for example, Meyer Memorial Trust, which is a big funder here in Portland and Oregon, that is their grant making goal. Grant makers, they also like to support innovation and new ideas. So if you want to try something out and you want to see how it goes, some grant makers are really into that. And then ultimately, grant makers like to strengthen nonprofit sector capacity. So a lot of grants that they'll give are dedicated towards capacity building because strong organizations results in tending to the root causes of some of these bigger problems. So when it comes to grant making, I would say that preparing and researching grant applications is the most it's a very time intensive and it's probably the most skill based donation solicitation you can do, skill based fundraising you can do. You do have to make sure you have a compelling case. You have to have good writing skills. You have to have good budgeting skills when you're filling out grants because they often will ask you, what do you need and why? So grant applications, they take significant time and organizational resources. So it's important to be mindful of that if you choose to pursue this particular method of fundraising. Now, one thing to note is smaller organizations, I recommend that they start with local funders and local grants because going for like a federal grant right out the gate isn't exactly going to be it's not going to produce many results. Sorry, I'm just trying to link you to, you may have noticed on the PowerPoint, I have a list of local funders that I'm happy to share with everybody. All right, let me go back to sharing. Okay, so now let's take a minute and go ahead and type in the chat, what fundraising activity do you think is best for your organization and why? Now, keep in mind, you can do all of these different activities, but I'm curious why you think that one particular type of activity is going to be best for you all. So things to consider your organization's capacity, the time, consider your infrastructure. Okay, Chris says a direct giving for capital campaigns, dumpster days, legacy giving. So dumpster days, that would be individual contributions, right? Where people show up to get rid of stuff in their home, perhaps, and then you ask them for to give an individual contribution in exchange.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go actual live here instead of chat for
Yeah.
that. But yeah, in Roseway, we've done Dumpster Day for a number of years, and as long as we get a grant that offsets the expenses, and that's key, then it can be a good fundraiser because it's optional that anyone pays anything at all. But people are generally pretty generous, and so that ends up being our biggest fundraiser for the year. And we've relied on the Metro Refresh grant for that, which has included our area until this year, but does not any longer. So for neighborhoods who are within that equity needs area that Metro establishes, it can be a really good fundraiser.
Yeah, and that's a great point that Chris just made. So, what Chris is saying is essentially neighborhood association. It doesn't have to be a neighborhood association, but a lot of them do it. But organizations can use a small grant that they get from something, and then from an organization, it could be government, it could be another grant making entity, and then use that grant to put on an event that then can be used to solicit more donations to an organization. So the grant may be restricted to a certain event or activity, but then during that event or activity, you can then leverage the folks who are there to give individual contributions. Okay, and let's read some more. So John says, leaning towards grants because they seem to be like the best return for labor invested. They do take a lot of time, but if you do make grants your single focus or your primary focus, you can definitely do that. Catherine says individual funding because the mission Catherine's involved with Catherine's organization isn't focused and they can't effectively demonstrate social impact, but there is a lot of popularity involved with the organization. Yes, so that's a great point, Catherine. So, in essence, if your organization has a positive reputation in the community, but it's not necessarily an organization that, like a grant making organization or government, is prioritizing at the moment, really rely on the popularity and that good reputation in the community to solicit donations. Brittany's saying the best fundraising would be individual connections and business support in the local art district. Yes, art making, grant making related to arts and culture is unfortunately taking a hit right now. So relying on folks who are connected to art is going to be your best bet. Peggy says having events, having a volunteer speaker, perhaps, yeah, as an in-kind donation, that would be a great one. Individual or giving some tchotchkes or swag with individual donations. Spencer's looking for small local grants and one-time donations. And Brittany says our biggest support is via community events that support local artists. That's great. Yeah, because people, individuals like Portland, we're a pretty creative city, right? So we like to donate to that. So now that you all shared what you're thinking about, it's important to understand what you need in order to fundraise effectively with what you have chosen. So you'll notice here at the top, there are some icons, and then over here to the left, it describes different types of infrastructure that you will need in order to do grant making. Most of this applies to, or fundraising, sorry. Most of these apply to all types of fundraising, but some are more specific to government or grant making. So it's always important to have stories of impact. And stories of impact, you don't have to have a dozen stories. If you have one very compelling story about how someone was touched or impacted positively by your organization, you can have them come to networking events and speak about that, give a testimonial that you include in your marketing materials. Um, there's lots of different ways to organization in your community is something that folks look at. You're also going to have to be prepared if you are going to engage in a robust fundraising campaign. You're going to have to be committed to cultivating relationships. So sometimes a sponsorship offer may come after one meeting, but that's rare. It's going to be important to cultivate relationships with folks by showing up to networking events or other initiatives that funders are doing. It's important to convene funders or for meetings, speak with them, and don't start with an ask. Start by just focusing on cultivating that partnership. Now, it's really important to keep track of who is funding you, especially if it's individual donations, because you want to recognize those folks. So developing a system to track, manage, and recognize funders, you'll need that across the board. But when it comes to something like an individual donor or a business, having some kind of system in place where perhaps you send a card every time someone donates or in a nice email or a social media shout out. So developing that kind of system is going to be key. And that's related to having a robust outreach and communications infrastructure. And that ties into creating a positive reputation and legitimacy in your community. Now, once you get more into government and grant making, it's going to be critical to have good budgeting skills. So, in my experience, government in particular, they need you to, beyond creating a budget to ask for funding, they then need you to report on how you spent that money. So, for example, an organization we're working with right now has a government grant, and every month we have to report on exactly what they spent, and it has to correspond to about 17 different categories that they set in their original grant budget. It's also critical to have good writing skills for government funds or grants. I hate to say it, I'm not a big fan of it, but a compelling narrative, a well-written narrative is what gets funders interested. And also, you have to consider if you have um, the infrastructure to do compliance and reporting when it comes to government or other grants. That's because they'll often ask you to track your results, to evaluate your outcomes, things like that. They will often have deadlines for submitting reports, submitting budget documents. There's a lot that goes into compliance. So government and other grants, it's high labor, but it can also be high reward. So what do you think is the most effective fundraising tactic overall? So Chris says for us, so for neighborhood associations, it's been local grants. I would definitely agree with that one, that neighborhood associations really benefit from local grant making entities. All right. I'm seeing some people say that relationship building is the most important tactic. And the answer to that is yes, because even if you have um, grants, so say you won a grant from an organization, say from like Meyer Memorial Trust, if you have a good relationship and you have cultivated the relationship with that your grants officer, they may find money for you later down the road that isn't associated with a grant. So building relationships is the most important tactic. It's also important to just have a good strategy of where you're going to spend your time. So, are you going to spend 50% of your time developing fundraising events and organizing and planning events related to fundraising, or are you going to spend that time writing grants, researching grants, doing grant compliance? So it's really important to develop a strategy. And Brittany says the connection can also lead to other opportunities. Exactly. So getting the word out is critical. So now here's just some tips and tricks related to grant making. So it I cannot overstate how important relationships are to fundraising, especially if you're a local smaller organization. It's important to have a clear strategy. So you may want to do like three different types of fundraising, but being clear on how much time you are spending on each type is going to be important for you and your colleagues. A lot of you all, it seems like, are volunteers. And so you have to be mindful of that when you are working on a strategy or developing a fundraising strategy. Start early, and like relationships move at the speed of trust. And so, start having conversations with folks, making connections. If you're working on a grant, start as early as you can on your application. It's important to also be patient. You're not going to get the first grant you go for. That's very rare. You're not going to get thousands of dollars of individual donations immediately. That's rare. But the more you're able to prove yourself, the more you're able to share impact stories once you get money in the door, the more that those your the better your reputation will get, and then funds will start flowing in more. Be mindful of your capacity and infrastructure. Do not overpromise on grants. Like if you see like a housing voucher grant or something, don't just go for it unless you're clear that you have the infrastructure to do something like that. Tap into your connections, personal connections, professional connections. You never know who can be the conduit to something great. this is especially if you're creating grant applications, but have some evergreen materials. So every grant's going to ask you about your organization. Every grant's going to ask you about your initiatives, and they're going to ask a lot of the same things. So just have materials ready to go that you can just copy and paste into new applications. It's always important to recognize your funders. So there is no donation too small. So say someone donates $10 and you thank them, they may think, oh, I think I'm going to do 100 next time. And then maybe eventually you get a donor advised fund donation from them. You never know where your funds will come from. So treat every funder the same. There's no donation too small. It's important to make sure you're always documenting your organization's impact, especially if you are going to be doing grant reporting or something like that later on. And then be clear on why a donation is needed and how it will help fulfill your mission. So we need $1,000 to give 20 $50 gift cards for people who need to buy groceries this week. Like people will really it will resonate with them because that seems achievable to them. Always tell stories of impact. Like I said earlier, it can be just one story that you use. You don't have to have, it doesn't have to always be like, oh, well, 100 people were um, reached by this. Yes, Catherine, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know if this question is going to be better for a little bit later. What I'm thinking about is how much of this depends on executive leadership. Like, so much of this, I feel, could be reverse engineered. Like, if you really understand what's going to make an impact for your audience, and then you could engineer programming, like that will make that impact. But let's say you're in the situation where the executive leadership, like, isn't necessarily, um, you know, that strategic in the way that they're planning programming. How
Mhm.
can we like how can we really do this effectively when that executive leadership maybe isn't 100% strategic in what they're doing?
Um, That's a great question. I'll noodle on that for 1 second. Let me process that a little bit more and I'll get through this and then we'll do the Q&A. So I just have one more slide to go with this, and that's just related to what makes an effective elevator pitch. So one thing, especially if you do have executive leadership, everyone in an organization should be ready to launch an elevator pitch or give an elevator pitch whenever they can. So an elevator pitch is about a 30 to 60 second um, spiel, a summary of your organization. So it has these components. So it starts by quickly describing the problem you are trying to solve. So in order to make it strong, be clear, be specific, say exactly why that matters. And then you move into describing what your organization is doing to address that problem. And in that case, you want to be concrete and describe why it is an effective solution. From there, you'll describe impact. So that demonstrates the credibility of your initiative and the effectiveness. So then you'll say what you've accomplished, who you've served, and what makes you capable of solving that problem. From there, you'll move into describing your vision. So where you fit in the bigger picture. So, what becomes possible if you succeeded with what you're trying to do? What is the future you're working towards? And then finally, an elevator pitch, if appropriate, ends with an ask. So it can be an invitation to learn more. It can be an invitation to meet with key folks, or you could ask for funding or a partnership opportunity. So that's it for now. I'm going to do a Q&A, but I did want to let you all know we're doing a beginner friendly workshop on budgeting 101 on Monday, April 13th. I'll send info about this in a follow-up email as well, but if you'd like to register, there's the QR code, and then we will move into Q&A. Oh, well, after you learn more about us, learn more about us here, and then we'll do a Q&A. Okay. So, Catherine, your question was basically if your executive leadership doesn't have a strategy, how do we move forward with that? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, that's part of it. I was trying to think of how I could make the question more concrete. Like if I take the elevator pitch document that you just brought up, like if I take that back to my org, every person might have a completely different answer for this. And it might be very difficult to get everyone on the same page about this. It might
Mhm.
be difficult to get people to understand even why we're starting with like, what's the problem and how are we solving it? And what's the relevance of that? Like, it seems to me like at a certain level, um, like all of this comes back to the executive strategy. Like to do effective fundraising, you have to like have that really clear mission. You have to have all your programming be on that mission. And then your fundraising like has to be able to point to like, we did this programming because we were achieving this outcome and we know we achieved this outcome because you know what I mean? It's like all these different steps require like a certain level of executive leadership, if that makes sense. Like, what do we do if we're like fighting that?
Yeah, so what I would say in that situation, I mean, it does sound like focusing first on creating buy-in from everybody and creating that shared understanding. So your organization's mission perhaps can function as a focusing event. Now, there's nothing wrong with fundraising, like say someone over here thinks, oh, we're achieving this, and someone over here thinks, oh, we're achieving this. That's okay. And you can use that in your fundraising, especially if you're doing networking events. But it sounds like ultimately there is some there needs to be some work in what you're describing on being clear on the organization's mission and on what the organization is hoping to achieve. So then that would take more I would say creating a culture and of fundraising and creating buy-in. I do want to recognize it's 7:30, so if you need to hop off, thank you all for joining. I'll stay on for more questions, but otherwise, thank you for attending.